Hi, I'm James Constable, and you're listening to the James Constable Podcast, powered by Get Radio.
I love the emphasis on powered there. I felt right. It felt right.
I think that's the best one yet.
That is the best one, yeah. Well, it's going to improve every episode. Hello and welcome to episode number 4 of the James Constable Podcast. And I think we've all been looking forward to this one in very different ways. We are going to unpack 2 for the price of 1 in terms of seasons. We're going to rattle through Oxford being back in the Football League for the first time, and also moving into what was quite a second year in the Football League as well, mentioning a town not too far away from Oxford called Swindon. But that will all come. We have to go in sort of chronological order. So look, let's start at the back end of the last season, where we've been promoted. We're back into league football for the first time in a long time. What is your feelings going into the new season? We kind of dealt with the summer at the back end of it, but kind of maybe take us through those first couple of days of training back in, how the mood of the camp was. Is it a case of survival, or is it a case of let's see what we can do in league football?
Very different to the previous season where everyone was excited to get back. We spent half the summer intoxicated and like just enjoying that. So actually getting back, like we were enjoying the break, enjoying the sort of open top buses, the parties that came with that. So obviously that was good. But now, like I say, we're back in. We'd sort of got pre-season organised. We knew we had some good games coming up, and obviously back in the Football League it was different. The fixtures coming out. We were looking at games. We were like, it was like more. Obviously the fixtures came out in the conference, and it didn't have that same feeling of who we've got, like Christmas, who we've got New Year, like the big games that were coming. So obviously for us, it was nice to see bigger games, like obviously get back into it and look forward to another sort of campaign that we believed we should be there or thereabouts as well.
Were there instantly 1 or 2 games that you picked out from that season that you were looking for? Like, do you look forward to playing a team that are better than you? Do you think we're the underdogs, we've got a chance? Or do you get that feeling? Because I'm trying to sort of use my five-a-side experience, and you're going to go, oh, they're a lot better than us. We're going to get beaten, and oh, look, we have
I'm going to be ill that week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think obviously the one sort of met was Stevenage. Was obviously they had come up automatically. We had come up through the playoffs, but that was one that I know, me personally, I was looking forward to playing them, because I felt like we'd give them a sort of a good season, but things we'd read and things we'd saw about how they said that they believed they were the better side, and which obviously in the record of the league showed they probably were, but I thought we were the better side in that season. So that was one, and then like say the cup competitions, things that you'd been sort of missing out on because you weren't a league club, and it opened up a new sort of chance to go and pit ourselves against the big clubs, which I say as a player, no matter what league you look at, the FA Cup, the teams lower down, they can't wait to play these bigger teams. So for us, we were that club now that could come and give the sort of big guys a run for their money. Yeah,
so first season, as Chris laid out his ambitions straight away, and is it strange when, you know, like last year it was, we need to get promoted, we have to get promoted. Oxford United are a big club, they do not deserve to be playing conference football. Now you get into League 2, is it realistic, or is it just kind of, look, do your best, let's try and survive? Or is it, right, let's push for top 6. Let's try and get top 6, and if we get top 12, we've done well.
I think, like, again, that sort of safety and trying to stay in the division and things, that was never thought about, I don't think. I don't think it was like a case of, let's try and survive. I think it was top 6 and above, look at promotion, look at sort of getting in the playoffs. I think playoffs were probably like the minimum we thought we should be achieving with the squad we had, and, like, say, the way that the club had come from to that point and the confidence that had given everybody. I think that was our aim, was to break into that playoff positions and try and achieve at least that.
Well, is there something about when you make that transition we've said about in previous episodes about feeling like you were at a pro club and it was a level that Oxford shouldn't have been at? Is there sort of like a switch that changes? Are there people who suddenly don't fit the mould so much in the Football League? How does that change the transition into the Football League?
I think we were, like, as we mentioned, we're already doing stuff above the level we were at. So obviously going into the Football League, it stepped up another level. Like, say, we went off to America and we did things that, like, there weren't many clubs probably in our league or the league above that were actually going out to America to do pre-season. So I think we were already starting to to take it to the next level for that sort of sense. But like I say, also that the way things were being run, like obviously the Kelvin had come in and sort of that side of the football club had changed. So I think we were sort of geared up really to go again and like say try and get to League One.
Are you still chinning 2 flat Red Bulls at this stage, or has that gone out the window?
Had been knocked on the head.
Okay.
I think Jordan sort of made his way out and obviously on to different things, and like I say that slightly changed. So
Okay.
the Red Bulls went, and I think it was more wine gums and I think in the league you get supplied electrolyte drinks and stuff. So the Red Bulls were gone, and the club was saving probably a fortune on having to buy
Bit disappointed.
flat
Flat
energy
ready,
drinks. Yeah.
I just wonder if they've been doing it at Aston Villa, if Jordan Wilson's been there now. Maybe that's why all those Villa players haven't been performing. So.
Maybe.
Who knows? So, from a personal point of view, you're starting a new season, club captain. How was that made kind of official to you? Because it had been sort of on and off. We've gone through it. It's been a strange old season, the one before. I guess this season is all about clarity. James, you're the captain of Oxford United in League Two. How does that make you feel?
Oh, amazing. I think back to the previous year, it was like Muzz had issues with his back and he'd missed games, and it was never decided, but every time he would either not start or he would come off, I would just see like obviously the captain's armband on my peg, or it was never really discussed, it just happened.
Is that how you found out?
I'd come in on a match day and obviously like if Muzz had pulled out or he'd pulled out in training, like we wouldn't know as such until we'd go in on a Saturday and there's my shirt and the captain's armband. It wasn't sort of a thing. And then obviously midway through that season, it was obviously Muzz is struggling a bit more. If he is to obviously not be able to continue this season, you'll be captain, and that's sort of the way it went. So I think Jake then would have been sort of deputy, but it was nothing that was ever sort of set out. It wasn't obviously, and then sort of later on in that season, Muzz obviously unfortunately got the injury. So I think coming into that new season, that was just, for me, I knew I was obviously going to be captain. I was hoping that nothing was going to change during the summer, but obviously to get in and see that, it does bring that added sort of bit of sort of enjoyment, excitement, like leading the team out in a sort of back in the Football League with the armband was obviously amazing to do at Wembley, but in the league is fantastic as well.
Well, it's a stark contrast. We talked about almost points and it not working out at Walsall, not working out at Shrewsbury, and being the young guy trying to break into the team. It's the polar opposite. Not only are you established at Oxford, but you're leading them out. It must have felt like a big personal return. You talked about the club, but for you personally, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's a huge achievement. Like I say, a huge achievement. I've obviously been at other clubs where I've been given the captain's armband, but I say to lead the club out, that we'd done it at Wembley. We're, like say, back in the Football League, the sort of back on the coupon, Jerome Sale commentary, and like say, little things like that go through your mind when you're back in, and like say you're getting ready to go back out. You remember those things that they said, and even to this day, you can't hear that without sort of getting that sort of hairs on the back of your neck stand up. So, to do it was a massive achievement. Like I say, I always love being captain, and I've spoke before on to different people about sort of my captaincy and how I did it. And like I say, I'm probably different to most. I led sort of by example in terms of play, and maybe not so much in terms of sort of managing the change room. We had, say, so many big characters in there. You didn't need to sort of maybe manage those as much. It was
You knew your place type thing, yeah.
Mine was more probably like leading by example out there, like say, doing everything I can for the team and hoping sort of the lads behind me are backing me up and following from my sort of example. So they're not so much probably with the yellow cards and the tackling, but the actual commitment. And
I won't get the stats out.
Yeah, leave them. Well,
I'm sure it'd have been very similar in League Two as it was in the conference.
Well, we will get to that. We're going to dive into sort of the captaincy side of your role in a future episode. So make sure you tune in for that. So back in the Football League, and things start well. Kick off the new season with back-to-back wins in September. So that man's head, I'm looking for a nod of approval and agreement. And you get your first of the season. It must be the monkey off your back, getting the first goal of the season in League Two football.
I will just add, it's 5 games in. Rich has made it sound really glamorous, but it's 5 games in before you get the first win. 5 clean sheets out of 6 games, so that's a bit better. But not just 1 goal, but a hat-trick. And it's your first one that actually counts, because Chester from the year before, as we said last episode, that expunged from the records.
Yeah. No, I think, to come back in and obviously score, I think for me, it was obviously tough leaving Walsall, tough leaving Shrewsbury. Like, obviously, they were obviously Warsaw in League One at the time, but then got relegated to League Two. So I felt like I could do it at that level. But again, it was that I needed to get in there and I needed to do it physically and show that I can do it. Like I say, in myself, I had belief that I could do it. But until you're sort of put in that situation and sort of given that opportunity, then it's over to me and like I say, the rest of the guys to prove that we're good enough to be at that level and we should be at that level.
Yeah, no, it's a good job we've got Statman Ted here, isn't it? Yeah. Otherwise, we'd be an absolute disaster, just reading off facts and figures that are completely false and erroneous. And I'm pretty sure we won the Champions League that year. Talking about stability, it felt like the club was becoming a lot more stable in the Football League. Yourself as captain, as you said, the results started to go. We had a decent September. And also, Chris puts pen to paper for a new deal as well. Was the feeling around the club that he was 100% the man to take the club forward and higher? Obviously got promoted back into league football, was obviously a good start, but was kind of the sky the limit for him?
I think so. Like I say, for us as players, like it was a positive thing. Like I say, that outside of the club, everything was stabilising. We still, even at this point, probably had no clue that the sort of issues they'd had with money, and like now that obviously we're back in the Football League, the difference that made, it was, as I say, as a player, you don't tend to think about that too much. It's only sort of later down the line you hear things and that changes that. But I say for us as players to see that happening was a big sign that actually the club are looking to kick on. And obviously with this guy in charge, like we've got every chance to be a part of that and kick on with him, because I say even at that stage in League Two, you could feel he wouldn't be at League Two level forever. He's obviously still learning, still young, but he had sort of all the tools really to go on and manage at the top levels as it showed with his career.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just on a sort of on a management level, people speak of harmony in the dressing room, and I guess that has to be facilitated through the manager and having that stability and having that almost that likability. Yeah. You go, he's staying around a long time. That does it relax you? Does it make you feel better? What's the sort of atmosphere with everyone when that sort of happens? You go, right, Chris has signed a 3-year deal. Relax, play better, looser, keen to impress more.
Yeah, I think again as players you see him sign for 3 years, so I think your sort of natural thing as well. Like I wouldn't mind staying for 3 years if he's staying for 3 years, and that, I think that's probably a little bit more of you've seen the managers stay in. So if you've got, like I say, a relatively good relationship with the manager, you're thinking, well, if he's going to be sticking around, like there's every chance that he likes you and you might be sticking around. If it's not, there's obviously players that were on the fringes that probably thought, well, that's my time up then. If that was their last year of their contract, they'd be thinking, well, he didn't like me then, so maybe that might not be something for me going forward. But yeah, I think for the group, it definitely stabilised everyone to think, well, you're not going to have change. I've been, like say, with other clubs where they've changed manager and it's sort of completely sort of derailed seasons, and obviously when managers leave, it can have a big impact on the playing sort of staff. They take people with them. So obviously the fact he was staying and we knew that made a big difference.
There's a point that you've made in there that I think we're going to come back to a little bit later on in the episode that we talk about. But when Chris signed that 3-year deal, you're club captain. There obviously has to be a great deal of trust and a kind of, like you said, leading by example on the pitch. Are you kind of going, okay, well, I'm in it for the long haul here as well? Is it that correlation?
Yeah, I think 100%, especially for like me. I remember sort of having a number of conversations with Chris saying that when there was ever talk of contracts, I'd sign as long as they wanted to keep me. I was desperate to stay around and obviously be part of it. Obviously, I knew that the club weren't going to stay, hopefully, at that level for long. I felt the ambition of the club, Kelvin, obviously people you'd see around, Jim Rosenthal, Timmy Mallet, like people that you didn't see at many clubs that were stood in the stands cheering the team on. They're big personalities, they're big people, and like I say, they've been around long enough to remember the club at the very top level. So I feel that was always the case, that they were looking to sort of kick the club on, and like I say, it wasn't going to be long before they were back challenging for the sort of top leagues.
Well, you mentioned as well, being back in league football afforded you cup competitions as well, which is such a silly thing that I completely didn't think of when you said that. You just automatically go, oh yeah, you know, League Two sides get automatically into it, but you go through qualifying and goodness knows what else for sort of lower leagues. Statman Ted, let's go through a couple of the kind of big games and big results in the return to the League Cup.
Well, second game of the season, having drawn 0-0 in the first one, you have League One Bristol Rovers come to the Kassam, 6-1 win.
Yeah.
Must have just been mental.
I just don't think anyone expected it. I think there was obviously a different sort of excitement. The first game, obviously 0-0, no goals. Like, it was a little bit maybe coming away flat. We wanted to get off to a good start. Obviously Rovers rocked up, and like I say, I think we were thinking back then if it's a draw, you get a replay and things like that. So we're thinking, look, at least if we get a draw, like minimum,
get back to our place,
get another game. So, but I don't think anyone envisaged that was sort of going to come around, that we played like that.
Crazy. That's the least attended game of the whole season. Only 5,008 people turned up for it. Do you think they just thought you were going to get better?
Well, it's one of those. I think when the season started the way it did, and obviously things like that, it might sort of think, well, like we're look forward to the next league game or whatever. But you say like the lowest attended, it didn't feel like that. It felt, obviously it helped. We were whatever up in the first sort of half an hour, but it didn't feel like it was a sort of half empty stadium. The atmosphere was crazy on that night, and like I say, some of the goals we scored were decent goals as well.
I was going to say, what's it like in those games? We've watched them. You've played in them, where the crazy scorelines happen, where you see a 6-1 against Bristol Rovers. Are you feeling like anything you touch will turn to gold? You're thinking you're getting the ball further out than normal and going, why not tonight? Why not? Is it that feeling?
Yeah, where you see normally sort of centre half, so someone's strolling up thinking, wow, we've scored 6, I can have a dig now. But yeah, I think the sort of those sort of games, as it goes like that, and the sort of scores start racking up, I think if you've got a manager, then sort of start taking players off and trying to rest people. Like say, you get people just popping up and thinking, well, I'll have a dig. And like say, some of the, I think Simon Heslop scored a couple of goals that night, and I don't think he scored many like that again throughout the season. It was one of those things where he just, like say, had a hit it, and like say, it was one of those games where pretty much everything we tried came off, and we give him a right good sort of hiding in the end.
Well, stark contrast to that, the second round you get going away to West Ham. Your supporters who didn't turn up for that first one certainly turned up for that.
We nearly got the same, I think, going away. But yeah, I think to go sort of to their bowling ground and Upton Park, and what that meant for as like say a fan growing up and seeing the bubbles before kick-off, like it was all the atmosphere coming down the tunnel onto the pitch.
It's crazy. Conference Premier, however many 2 months before, to then turning up at a Premier League ground and giving them a really good run for their money. Scott Parker took him to the 92nd minute to get a winner in that game. You must have really felt like to have gone from the lows of Gateshead away to suddenly their packed stadium. It must have just felt Cloud 9 would be an understatement.
I think Wembley helped. I think like we were sort of fresh in our memory of that. So like I say, going to West Ham and sort of feeling the sort of wrath of their fans desperate to get a result. But we did all right on the night. Like when I sort of look back and see it, I think I dread to think if they had the stats with possession and things like that. So I felt like we were camped in our own half for lots of that game.
Don't get them, Teddy. Don't get them.
Like I say, I had a shot, and we had a couple of shots, I think, on the night, like to sort of get out of our half. But we did so well to sort of defend and sort of stick in there as long as we did. And then obviously someone with that sort of quality pops up and puts it in the back of the net is tough.
Well, I'm intrigued because obviously for us, we've talked about the way we view football is different. And for us, I would get a bit of fanboys like freaking out if I saw a Premier League footballer down the pub or whatever. But do you get that? Because you're playing League Two to play against Premier League players, someone like Scott Parker who's captain England. Yeah. Is there a bit of wow factor in that?
Yeah, I think like obviously being captain, we're in the with the referees before the game, and like say we sort of just stood there just looking like me and Chris like what's going on here, like. But obviously then sort of come out, and Scott was great, and we had a chat, and I said, look, obviously a Tottenham fan, like, I'd love your shirt after the game, and obviously little did I know.
And there's me thinking you're going to say I'm going to leave one on you, but there we go. No, fair enough.
I know that was obviously going to be the person that sort of ended the sort of cup heartbreak for us and knock us out, but obviously fantastic to, like say, get his shirt that night, and obviously it eased the disappointment a little bit that I've got that at home to as a reminder of, like say, the game and the experience, because it was an experience to go there, and obviously now it not being there is sort of that added sort of bit of a nostalgia that we were sort of one of the last sort of clubs to players as for Oxford to go there.
So there were sort of one or two sort of highlights and sort of things we picked out from the first season back in the league, which was, is it fair to say that it was, I don't want to say a bit of a nothing season. It was not the highs of the top six.
Consolidation.
That's a much better word than that. Thank you, Statman Ted. You cemented your place in the league, and then we get to the end of the first season. Before that, what's your thoughts going into the end of the season? We've heard at the start of the podcast, Chris Wilder's been given a 3-year contract, club captain. Consolidation for this season being in there. Is it, well, we can build on next season. We can go 1 better, 2 better. We can get into the mix, into the playoffs. We've held our own against some big teams in this league.
Yeah, I think, like I say, it was definitely a season of finding our feet, getting to a position of knowing, like say, the clubs that we were going to be up against. Disappointing, like obviously goal scoring didn't get as many as I would have liked, and obviously for the team not getting where we would have liked to have got to. But I think we mentioned before, obviously, early on in that first season, I'd sort of found that my contract was different. Like, obviously, we've been promoted, so I was expecting a little bit more in my wage packet, which I'd found that wasn't there. So, again, during that season, I had sort of things that were sort of out of my control, but that couldn't be changed. Like, I had to just stick with the money that I'd been on the previous year due to contract problems and things, and then it would be rectified at the end of the year. So it shouldn't make a difference, but it's like, say, you'd achieve something, you'd sort of like look forward to that little bit extra or whatever you'd add in your contract. But again, it was I think like an error at the club or some sort of where they exchanged contracts from conference contracts to Football League. There'd been a mistake, but it couldn't be rectified. So I think it was a sort of strange season with that going on, and like say having to figure out how that gets rectified. And
dare I say, to compare that to sort of people listening, the situations and stuff. We've all been in jobs, and if you're expected to get something a little bit extra and you don't, it irks you a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it did. Like say for me, I knew it's like say I think if you were on loan or someone had been at the club very short amount of time, I think it could have caused a fair bit of sort of issue. But I think, say for me, I was sort of happy with the resolution we come to and sort of like a bonus at the end of the year. But it was it was just strange to sort of go through that sort of excitement of getting back in the Football League and all that brings, and then like obviously a little bit of a sort of issue that
admin error
you got
comes up in the Football League.
Try and sort out. But again, I think because I knew that the sort of situation and the club and everything like that, I was happy to just sort of get on with it and not sort of cause too much of a deal about it. But like I say, it was just a shame that it happened, and like I say, it was something that couldn't be sort of done until the end of the year.
We certainly justified whatever noughts or anything we're missing from the from the contract. Yeah. But Statman Ted's got the end of season facts and figures, which, to be honest, was a pretty good year for you.
Yeah. I know you said you would have wanted to score more goals, but third year on the trot, club's top scorer, 17 goals in League Two, the highest tally you ever got at that level. Yeah. So, and that must feel good in itself, and also Supporters Player of the Year as well. So still accolades to be had, despite maybe consolidation, and 3 years on the trot, you must really be feeling like, yeah, I'm a big name here. Without, you still say about not causing a fuss and things, but feeling like you were really part of something, part of the Oxford family, as it were.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as a forward, I always set 20. That was my sort of go-to amount. Like they would always ask you, and you'd be like, "No, I've not set any targets. I've not." But I think 20 was a number. I'd obviously say 26 and 29, and like these goals were sort of rattling in at the conference level. And I was thinking, like, I want to go and show the same amount in there. So obviously, like say 17 was for the whole season was okay, but I'd have liked to have got 20 and, like say, really sort of showed that at that level I can score goals. And like say, it would, having been sort of the previous 2 seasons chasing it out with the top scorer, looking on a Saturday, did he score, did I score, and sort of having that race to then, like say, being lesser sort of in terms of goals and not having that same sort of feeling like you wanted to compete with someone and try and win, like say, another sort of golden boot or whatever and chase those guys down was a shame that I couldn't do it.
Given your foul output, though, I must say I'm a bit surprised it took to your 3rd season to get your first red card.
Brilliant.
I always sort of, I think some that obviously difficult straight reds, but I think yellow, once I got plenty of yellows, I think I managed to sort of control it enough to stay just the side of the line that I would stay on the pitch. But obviously, yeah.
Well, the red card was a second yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that Crew?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think I made a tackle, so that was where it started.
Leading from the front.
When I tried to make a slide tackle, that's when
That's
when
when
it gets,
that's when the cards
it's
come
not
out.
good.
Oh dear. Well, okay, so we've ended the first season back in league football. Let's move on to kind of the summer, a strange summer for you and for the club. Rumours circulating, transfers, potentials. We've spoken about for the first bit about being Oxford United captain, being the forefront, scoring a lot of goals, not as many as you'd like, scoring a decent amount of goals in League Two. The summer brings, it feels like, unwanted attention and turmoil in terms of maybe distractions about the coming season ahead. How is it for you?
Yeah, I think as a player, when you're linked with clubs or people are coming in, it's like a little bit of a nice sort of feeling. You're like, oh, they must have seen something, they must have liked. But I think for me, I was sort of happy where I was. I was settled. Like say, we got the first season out the way. We had obviously talk of sort of players coming in and like really sort of kicking on again, and that was no different sort of in the pre-season. That was the aim, is going to be like we've had our season now. We know what it's about. We know what it's going to take to be successful in this league, and that was going to be the case of knuckling down and going one better than that. And like say, with little bits of added quality we've made and changes, and I think we changed sort of training grounds that summer, and we were then sort of wanting to kick on and like I say, really give it a go that year.
Well, yeah, I mean, you must have felt a lot of buzz. I mean, the teams that are sort of down here with your, Lutons and Yeovilles and Bristols sniffing around, like you said, that you're doing something right to put yourself in the shop window. Yeah. We'll go into sort of greater detail about this again on a future podcast, but just describe the Bournemouth deadline day fiasco.
Yeah.
Just take us through. Literally, just take us quickly through the day, for example.
I think, like I say, I'm pretty sure I trained that day, and obviously, like I say, deadline day. So we sort of finished training, and Chris had said, look, they've made an offer, and if you want to sort of go and speak to them, and they were third or fourth bottom in League One. So again, it's one of those clubs you don't sort of turn down. Eddie Howard, I think, recently departed and gone up to Burnley, and it felt a lesser opportunity because he was obviously a big name and had done whatever he had done there. So it was a strange one to, like say, go down there and speak to them and sort of try and figure out whether it was going to be something or not that I would sort of consider. So I took Dad and we went and met Steve Fletcher and Lee Bradbury, and they were sort of caretaker charge, but they sort of could still make decisions and sign players. So we pulled in. I remember sort of seeing the chairman, Eddie Mitchell, at the time, and it was that they had greeted me, the managers, and said, look, chairman, this is James. And he was like, okay, hi. And it was like straight away, an instant.
All that buzz has just evaporated.
The balloon had just popped, really. It was like not great that the chairman didn't seem overly sort of interested. So we sort of went through, looked at the stadium, looked at change rooms and things. I just remember thinking, like, this isn't a step up in terms of class. I felt, obviously, Oxford Stadium was bigger. Like the facilities looked better at Oxford, so it was. We sort of sat down and we sort of spoke about. They already had a pre sort of contract ready to what they were going to offer, and again, it was more than what I was on at Oxford. And but I remember just sort of speaking to them, and they were trying to include things for bonuses, cut bonuses, promotion, all these type of things. But we left, and like say we said like we'd have to think about it and get back to them. And like say we drove back home, and we sort of said, like, you know what, like for me it just doesn't, it's not right. And Laura's mum and dad, my wife now at the time, lived in Wimborne, which was 15 minutes from Bournemouth Football Club. So obviously they then found out. I think Laura was thinking, she might be able to move back home and see her family. And so off the pitch, it sort of worked, it fitted. But actually, like say, on the pitch, and for me, it didn't really sit right. And obviously Laura's been together 12 years, and she's followed that sort of journey with me along the way. But she was keen for me to do what was right for me, not just because she could live at home and have her mum and dad nearby. So, we came back, and I remember getting a call about 10 o'clock at night that night from Bournemouth saying, look, we've spoke to the FA, we can hold the deadline. Like, if you can come back down, we can increase the money. And I was like, it's not about the money. It's not I'm not signing because you haven't offered enough. I said it's more footballing reasons and where I am at the moment and enjoying that. And obviously didn't say to them, but the position they were in the league and we were top of League Two, and it just didn't make sense. I just had a feeling that I'd go there. Obviously, we would get relegated.
Pass each other on the way. Yeah.
So again, it was definitely sort of football reasons as to why. But obviously, since then, I've sort of looked back at that sort of period, and there was lots of talk about wage demands on my behalf, and that's why the sort of deal didn't come off. And I say at the time, I probably didn't sort of realise what they were sort of saying. Almost, it made it sound like that I was
holding out for more
money when 1,000,000% it was my decision not to sign there. So I don't understand if they'd offered me all that money why I didn't sign. So
I think it's funny, isn't it? You say that. I think a lot of people don't actually see that behind. They just see you, James Constable, striker, 17 goals, club. This is what we're offering more. Your family, you've got. There's so much to think about.
Yeah.
It's like, again,
we literally just got 2 dogs and like little things like that shouldn't. But we
but
were
it's
like,
on your
what
mind.
do we do about the dogs? What do we? So,
but it's life.
Yeah,
you're having to manage life around your career, like anyone would.
Yeah, and like little things that, like say, probably shouldn't come up. They started coming up, and we were like, obviously back then we didn't have kids, so that wasn't a factor. But actually, like say, we'd sort of come away, and it was like even the talk of, like say, I think I was playing Call of Duty with a few other lads. It was like the call came back, and they were like, right. So I was like having to stop the game, like say bye to the lads. I've got to deal with this, and
I just find it mad that it's you said 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is transfer deadline day that went through till midnight. This is when it went through till midnight. You used to stay up, or you used to wake up in the morning and go, right, who we got? So 10 o'clock at night, they're still trying to tempt you, or discussions being had between parties.
Yeah, and I think again, like now you look at it from, they probably had certain targets that weren't coming off, and like they were, then things got moved around. So like at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock when we left Bournemouth the first time, the deal was dead, and they probably then moved on to the next targets, and then for whatever reason that didn't happen, and then the phone goes, they're trying to get you back in. So you sort of realise, I think after that actually it's sort of a merry-go-round of final day stuff. But in the end, like I say, I think they even increased the money, even though we weren't asking for more money. It got increased, and again, I let them know, look, thanks for we appreciate it. We obviously great to chat to them, but for me and sort of the family and everything, it wasn't going to be a move that was going to be sort of coming off, whether it was 10, 11, whatever, it wasn't going to happen.
So the madness of deadline day passes. Back at Oxford United, looking at the fixture list for this season, there's 2 rather big games, and there's a lot of kind of history even before, obviously, Oxford Swindon, the rivalry goes back.
Yeah.
But even for you personally, there's a lot of information that kind of maybe people don't know about, and certainly that this fixture holds even more for you potentially.
Yeah, I think, like I say, growing up, we were sort of in an area, a little village, 10, 15 miles from Swindon, so we would always have the like Swindon guys come in and do, like say, the soccer schools, and like say for me, I was signed up on near enough every soccer school there was going. At that age, it was what I loved. So I spent every summer with the guys. Ivor Gum, who was one of the guys at the time, and he used to run it, and I think sort of had affiliations with them, and it was always branded Swindon Town. Like say, we'd always have like ex-players come back or hand out awards and things like that. And then obviously going forward, I sort of played at Cirencester, and we had a friendly, which Swindon Town I think were involved and wanted to have a look at some of our players, and I think tried to make sort of like almost like a link between the clubs. And then, going forward to Chippenham, Steve White, who's the sort of an ex sort of Swindon player, had sort of signed me really, and even sort of to this day, it gave me that opportunity that I was playing in Cirencester reserves and not really going anywhere. And then, like I say, he gave me that sort of first opportunity to play sort of men's football properly, but give me the opportunity to really sort of go and do what I wanted to do. So, obviously, being an ex-Swindon player at the time didn't really cause too much of an issue, didn't really think too much of it. But obviously as time goes on and you join a club that's sort of their biggest rivals and live on the outskirts of Swindon for the time that I was at Oxford, it made it, a little bit more sort of an issue that they were interested in and wanted to sign me.
How does that play out in your mind? Because, like you said, I don't know, a few people sort of listening to this now might be surprised that obviously, you know, sort of living around there as well, and the Chippenham factor as well. But does it give you more impetus for Oxford United? Is that who you're kind of, you know, you're with, and that's what you bleed now?
Yeah.
Or is it a distraction? Is it a confusion? You know, when that fixture list comes out and you see, you know, Swindon drop down, are you like, right, this is where I show them?
Yeah, I think as well, like with when I first signed my sort of first professional deal at Walsall, they were one of the clubs that were sort of chasing my signature then. So, and it always felt like they were there just to make sure they didn't miss out. Like they were like, oh, if so-and-so offers you a contract, make sure you let us know because we'll match it. And not that they genuinely wanted to go and say, look, we think you're good, like we want to sign you. It was, how would this look if there's a player that grew up and lived near the club and did all this, and then we let him slip and he goes and signs for a club 100 miles away. So
it's that difference between, you said at Walsall feeling really wanted and supported by Paul Merson versus, okay, you're here because you're local.
Yeah, and it was literally like, I think Iffy Nora was the manager at the time at Swindon, and he was constantly sort of on the phone and like, how did it go at Walsall? And I was like, yeah, it went really well. I really enjoyed it. And obviously they knew I was then going to Bristol City and then Swansea, and then obviously Swindon was going to be sort of last. But they were constantly wanting to check what I was doing and how I was getting on, more than saying like Walsall just said, look, there you go, there's a contract, we want you. Like, then obviously when we sort of signed and come out, they were like, look, thank God you didn't ask for like a penny more, because it would have been ripped up. They weren't interested in messing around, or they wanted to offer me a contract there. They wanted me to be there, but they weren't going to be asked for stupid amounts. And I think that's the other thing. People just imagine you go in and be like, right, on a piece of paper, this is how much I want. And that's, a lot of the time you get there and it's already done. They determined what, especially where my dad was my agent, we didn't have someone, sort of a team designated to sit in offices and work out what players are worth and what they want. This was very personal, like me and Dad, like, right, we go there, we see what they're offering, and we'll make that decision in the heat of the moment. And like say, I think a lot of people just think you turn up, or people call the club ahead and say, look, he wants 50 grand a week and he's not coming for a penny less. But it's a lot of the time that wasn't the case. It was just, you turned up and they had the contract there, and you sort of discussed it sort of as men as such, and that was it. But I don't, they never gave me that sort of feeling throughout any of the sort of negotiations with the, obviously Walsall and the Bristol Cities. They were all cards on the table. We like you. This is what we want to do. This is what we want you to be part of. And then it was like, oh, make sure you let us know if you get something, because we'd like to match it. So it was never going to be a case that, say, that was going to ever come off, even at that stage. But then obviously as time went on and I moved to the club, that their biggest rivals, it was certainly off the table then. So
as we mentioned, Swindon come down. It's coming up in the fixture list. The first game since 2002. They've got a rather interesting manager. A rather flamboyant one
with rather interesting opinions.
Rather interesting opinions, who enjoys shoving referees over in his time at Sheffield Wednesday. A phenomenal footballer, I think we can all agree. Yeah. Paolo Di Canio, manager of Swindon, just before the first game, starts to stir things up a little bit. Do you remember what he said?
I remember. Yeah, I was a Swindon fan, and someone that knew me knew that I wanted to come, and all this sort of stuff, which I say for a player is just odd to hear, because it's like, obviously people who know me know that obviously I follow Tottenham, but obviously,
which in some ways worse.
Yeah, at the current time it probably is. But I think they knew like who I supported. There's obviously pictures of me in Tottenham kit at 8-10 years old, so it just seemed strange to come out at that time. Like,
it's
say,
not
in
something
the build
you see
up.
managers doing.
No, it's not. And like say, I think looking back, it probably added that little bit of, I think, again, we talk about the game, but that sort of celebration showed what that little piece or that bit of press that he thought was probably trying to be a little bit clever and sort of getting people's heads and make a difference. Obviously, them sort of breaking into the ground and burning STFC in our pitch, all those little things actually just added to that sort of desire, that passion we had to go there and really sort of get the win that we were desperate to do.
Are you more fired up? I know we spoke in earlier episodes that you go into games and people didn't realise that, you know, sometimes you weren't 100%. You were 70% because of issues going on, not feeling great, maybe got knocks and bumps and what have you, because you're footballers. this game, are you doing anything different? Are you psyching yourself up even more? Are you trying to calm yourself a little bit more, not to get any more yellow cards and red cards? We'll come to that shortly. But are you kind of chomping at the bit to get out there, or are you just trying to play it down?
Yeah, I think for me, it was always a case of trying to sort of like calm myself, because I was, say if it was Barrow, if it was Exeter, anybody, I was excited, I was ready to go. But obviously I think this was a bit more added because of everything that had come out previously, and obviously the whole Bournemouth thing had come sort of to that prior to this game, so it was like that was then added incentive to. Obviously, I heard they were interested. I hadn't gone and spoke to them yet, but I knew I was having to perform. I had to keep my levels up. So I think all of it combined just meant that we went there, obviously driving up to the ground and just seeing the sort of Oxford fans being marched down the magic roundabout.
Moved. There's over 100 police. There's people on horses and things to keep things in order. It must have felt as close to like a big royal event more than anything else.
It was strange because it literally felt like the open top parade. It was like there was just yellow everywhere, and it was like we were just driving through, and it just reminded me of being on the bus and just seeing Oxford fans at sort of either side. It literally, we were driving through, and there was just police, and then Oxford fans just streaming in. Obviously, it was 12,000, I think, inside the ground, but it literally felt like almost for us like a home game. It was like strange. Like obviously, their fans made a lot of noise, but for us to see just to see a yellow, and it was an unbelievable feeling. But yeah, to get in, and as soon as we got in the ground, we warmed up. We were just desperate to get going. We've been reminded plenty of times. I think 38 years since they had won at the county ground, and we kept reading it in the press that how much this meant, and we knew anyway. But obviously, when you start putting sort of dates into there and how many years it had been, and I think for us, we took that responsibility, and we knew what it meant to go there and say that he was the extrovert sort of guy. But their players, they'd signed a lot of players that were sort of leading towards that as well. So we knew it was going to be sort of a bit of a fiery game, and we knew what we were coming into. So we were looking forward to getting there and getting it on. So
yeah, I mean, and you did, in a big way. Scored both goals, and the celebration. Just talk us through the release. It must have been a release. You know, you spoke about trying to calm yourself before every game. It's probably that times a million with everything that's gone on. Being called a Swindon fan, Paolo Di Canio marching up the touchline, like you say, flamboyant players there. You score the goal. Just take us through as fans how the goal scorer is feeling.
Well, it's again like we said it. Like you work like something we worked on over and over. Like this corner, Peter Levin, obviously one of the best players I played with for deliveries. Put it on exactly where you need it, and obviously the block. I think a block from Jake, and just give me that room to get a header. So we must have practiced the same routine 50, 100 times. And like never come off, or someone's broke free and headed it or cleared it. Literally, when you watch it back, you couldn't have got more perfect. My marker was blocked completely, free header, right where I needed it, and header. Obviously, didn't score a huge amount of headers, so it's nice to score that. And then like obviously that sort of feeling of relief. Like obviously we were winning, which was amazing, but obviously then we weren't stopped from tweeting or messaging, but I remember sort of the press and everything was quite geared up to not. They didn't mention it, or for me, I was told not to sort of aggravate and say anything.
It was. If we talk about personal battles, not only do you win the game, but Paolo Di Canio gets sent to the stands for dissent. It must really feel like a bit of a personal in that.
Yeah. Well, they equalised. I think Matt Ritchie equalised on the day, and I felt again we were a bit under the cosh towards sort of end of the first half, and then luckily got another free kick, and I think Lev's put in another sort of great ball, and I'm claiming it, but the keeper sort of just punched it straight off me and in. So I didn't really know too much about it, but yeah, to see it sort of go in and sort of go in at half time, leading 2-1 was, I remember just a noise at half time, and then second half we were right up against it, and like say almost the sending off of him made us a sort of difference. It was like that sort of distraction, that person that was there that was calling the referee over, like sort of having a go at their players and just sort of making it into a bit more of a sort of pantomime almost. That was gone, and obviously he was taken away, and we sort of rode our luck a little bit, but actually I think sort of on the course of the 90 minutes it was probably the result we deserved.
Yeah, so an incredible feeling, and one that Oxford United fans like yourself, relive over and
First
over.
away win in 17 ties since 73.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember chatting to Nathan. Like Nathan, obviously, I think they were covering it for BBC Oxford, and just sort of came onto the pitch, and it was like a scene from sort of like a cup final or something. It was the fans' noise. You could barely hear the interview I was doing. I was thinking, like, I couldn't hear what he was saying. He was I was just trying to lip read what he's actually saying, because the noise was just unbelievable. And obviously now the pictures are sort of iconic there. You see them everywhere. And I think the celebration of me, I think I'm hugging Wingy, and then you just see the sea yellow in the background is just, for us it was an amazing feeling. And really probably at that point we thought, not untouchable, but I think we thought, right, that's a big statement. It's early in the season that we can actually like compete with sort of one of the bigger teams that were fancied at that time, that we could go and beat them. So we were sort of confident that we would have a decent season.
So Swindon don't really go away this season. They're a constant. We get to January, and speculation is rife. What's going on? What's going on? I think I should just start there.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah, a lot. I think, for a player like you, obviously the bit being linked with certain teams and stuff, and like say, I'm just so focused on what I'm doing, and like say, try not to sort of let it affect too much of what you're doing. I think when I was at Chippenham and stuff, when I was younger, you'd hear so and so's watching or that, and it's so hard not to start like wearing your socks differently, or like wearing different shorts, or trying to like literally make yourself stand out or look.
Really? Is it?
You would literally do things differently. Like I remember Dad saying to me one game, like you didn't shut up. You were like trying to talk to everyone. You're trying to talk them through the game. Like why are you doing that? And it was like, someone was there, so you're trying to make yourself sound like more of a leader. And he was like, actually, you're taken away from your game. Like you're worried about everything else. Just focus on what you do and don't change. And I think even as you get older, there's still aspects of that. If you trying to sort of stand out and try and make yourself look different or that catch an eye. But I think for me it was just that season was again just a crazy season with what had gone on earlier in the season. Obviously Swindon and then obviously all the rumours constantly that were sort of floating around about clubs that were interested or that wanted to take me. So
one club, quite surprisingly, that wanted to take you was Swindon.
Yeah.
What look, is there any truth in the rumours that they wanted you? They were still keen on after what you'd done to them a few months before scoring against them. They were still keen. They were still going around there. I mean, there was incredible, Sky Sports news report stories saying that you wanted to speak to Swindon, and this is ultimately going to be quite an Oxford United podcast, and that's one of the worst things you can do. Set the record straight.
We should add that at this point in history, only 2 players have ever made that switch from Oxford to Swindon, and the last one was quite a long time ago. So.
I think even from the outset, I think the first sort of couple of bids had been rejected from the club. I hadn't been included. Which was like say fine for me. I didn't really need to be included in certain things. Obviously it's up to the club to accept or reject bids anyway. But obviously the third one, came in and I'd only just got to training and Chris just pulled me aside and said, look, we've accepted a bid. And I remember just sort of like literally like someone had just punched me in the stomach. I just literally didn't know what to do, didn't know what to feel. It sounds crazy, but I didn't even know how it would, does that mean I've got to go? Or like I couldn't sort of in my brain.
You didn't know if you could fight your corner and go, I don't want to go, I want to save.
So
wow.
It was it was a strange time, and I remember sort of coming out of the meeting and like say I'd spoke with Chris and I'd said, look, obviously I don't want to go. It's not something that I've sort of entertained, and I think even then I made him aware that this is going to sort of end badly for both of us, for me personally, because the fans are going to hate me thinking I'm going.
Well, there are these stories circulating. You're a Swindon fan.
Yeah.
There are still things online. People going, "Oh, is Constable a Swindon fan?" Like,
and obviously for the club as well. I thought for the fan base and what they're going to see and think, well, there's been chance for him to go to Bournemouth or Rovers or Luton or all these clubs that you've said no. All of a sudden you've said yes to Swindon, like of all people. Obviously, then later down the line you find out it was a substantial amount of money, and I sort of understand that side, but I think it was hard to take because I'd sort of said, look, it's not going to happen. It's it's not something that I would even consider. So I said, like, what do you want me to do? Like, am I to stay? And they were like, look, you can't stay. There's press head in here. There's everything going to be happening. So you just need to go and like say, go home, speak to your dad. And
Wow.
So I literally just jumped in the smart car, I must add. Like, it wasn't exactly the quickest vehicle to get home in, but I sort of jumped in the smart car and started sort of the route back up the 420 to Bassett. And like I say, I spoke to dad and said what had happened. And he was like, look, just get home, lock the doors. Like, obviously just put your phone on silent, whatever you need to do. But just obviously it was already starting. Messages were coming in. Like, people from obviously Swindon radio stations, Oxford people wanting to speak to me. Obviously Twitter was going crazy. The abuse, like,
But
it was
was anyone listening to you, or was it just they'd already made their mind up that the story that like we said, Sky Sports had broken that you'd wanted to speak to Swindon.
Yeah.
We all watched transfer deadline day. We all knew what was going on with people outside the grounds and everything. Yeah. You just hear that and you go, wow, that's a kick in the stomach for Oxford United fans.
Well, I said, for obviously they had made their minds up. Like, they had read the rumours, they had seen the sort of the headline that club accepted bid. So I think for them it was probably a case of they just assumed I was going. Like, they were like, well, why would the club accept it if the player didn't want to go? Or you just assumed that was what he wanted and that's what was going to happen. So, and I'd obviously spoke to Chris and Calvin on the way back and said, look, obviously it's not happening. I'm not going to speak to him. I'm literally going home. And they were like, yeah, that's fine. Just obviously go home. Just like, obviously, I remember deep down I was like, I was angry because I was missing training, which even now is just like such a stupid. But we hadn't even got a chance to train. I was in my kit. I was ready to go, but obviously sent home. So I was like thinking, well, I love training. I love being around the lads. I love being at the training ground. And literally from that, just being sent home, and I was thinking, well, and like, obviously I've chatted with Chris since, and we've sort of cleared the air. But at the time, I was made to feel that was my career finished if I wasn't either going to go or like there was going to be opportunities for other players to come in. So actually, if I stayed, that's fine. But my time might be up anyway in terms of playing and still to be captain, to be told that was pretty hard to take. But
well, we think of looking at a player being sent home. There's only one way it looks from a fan's point of view.
Yeah.
It like just fuels the story even more. And you say about personally, it almost like, have you done something wrong in all of that?
Yeah, it definitely did feel like that. Like I say, I remember driving home thinking, well, I was sort of still reliving that sort of conversation that my sort of time at the club was going to be limited if I wasn't to go. And I remember even sort of Chris sort of saying about the amounts of money I could be earning and like they might offer you this much a week. And I was like, yeah, but it doesn't make any difference. Like, as I was captain, I was, like, say the club had given me a lot. I had obviously delivered when I've played, but also they gave me the opportunity. They looked after me. The fans obviously had taken me to their hearts. Like, it was tough to hear that coming from the manager that, like, say, been my biggest fan.
It made you feel like $1 million.
Yeah, overnight almost, that we were in that sort of situation that relationship had really sort of soured, and I felt like I was not being forced out because ultimately I had time on my contract, but that our relationship was changing because it wasn't like it used to be. Like, someone that I thought was there to sort of protect me and sort of guide me, then was saying, like, actually, if you don't go, I can't promise you're going to be first choice or you're going to be captain or whatever going forward. So it was tough to take.
Is that purely money over everything else? Because, you know, Chris was managing the game where you beat Swindon. He saw your celebration.
Yeah.
He's not an idiot. He knows exactly what that would mean for the club, for you as well.
Yeah.
Is it just purely at that level, the Oxford United are? Is it purely because the money was there and it was right and it was such a difference that it meant that everything else was irrelevant? Yeah,
I think at the time it's just too much. But now looking back and hearing about Wembley and, like, obviously if that hadn't happened, what meant for the club, 300,000 seems like a hell of a lot of money for the club. So, but I've never really got to the bottom of why or the sort of reasons behind it or why it got to that stage. But as far as I'm concerned, that's all I can see as a reason why it doesn't make sense from a footballing point of view to sell your captain, your sort of leading scorer to the team
3 years on the trot.
25 miles up the road.
Your biggest
in the same league.
Yeah,
So,
biggest.
I didn't really sort of get to understand why or how that sort of made sense. But like I say, for me, it was never going to happen anyway. So I was just sort of disappointed I was missing training. I was sat, like, I remember Laura coming back from work and I was in the bath and she expected to sort of walk in and just find me sort of just rocking back and forth in a room. I'm just like in the bath and I remember just having my phone just desperate to sort of just tweet, like literally I spoke to Chris 4 or 5 times, spoke to Calvin and I was like, look, I need to put something out.
Yeah,
it's just,
set the record straight.
People are saying, I hope you die, I hope you get cancer, I hope your wife died. Like literally things that you wouldn't imagine. And these were people that were cheering my name 24 hours earlier in games and literally just imagining that it's almost happened. Like that in their heads, I've already signed off. It's done and dusted. So it was tough. And I like I say, all I wanted to do was just to let people know that it's not happening. Sort of calm it down, get sort of that cleared. And like I say, I was getting messages from people that I grew up with that are Swindon fans saying like, we would rather you didn't come, like because your links to Oxford. And then like you get other friends that would be like, look, if you come, this is going to be great. Like,
you're damned if you do, you're damned if
you
don't.
So you're literally stuck. But again, it was just for me. I was just desperate to be able to sort of let these people know that chill. Like I ain't going anywhere ahead. Like as far as I'm concerned, I'm staying. I've got 18 months or whatever left on my contract or whatever it was. It never even crossed my mind that I'd be moving. And like I say, I turned down opportunities for sort of bigger clubs, more money. Like I wouldn't then just take a deal with them, but I know from what Chris said, it could have been a sort of substantial amount of money for sort of a wage. But again, it wasn't something I was considering even for that.
At this point, I want to say a big thank you to Henry, who I bumped into just before we recorded this podcast. So I'm stealing your question, Henry. Don't worry, I've got it. He wanted to know where and when does loyalty play in all of this? Because you've been loyal to the club. You've kind of said that you've wanted to sign 10-year contracts. Yeah. If it was offered to you, you were super happy. Bigger clubs had definitely been sniffing around you. Swindon as well. Where does the loyalty factor come into, with Calvin, with Chris, who goes, do you know what? He's Oxford United. He's our club captain and he should be loyal to us. They've almost manufactured that not to be the case with, like I said earlier, being blindsided with the amount of money that we were talking about. Yeah. Where do you think that fell in terms of, was it just thrown out of the window?
Yeah, I think it is like obviously from my loyalty was with them, like 100%. Like say, I never wanted to leave at any point during my time there. So obviously to then hear them accepting bids and like say that they accepted bids from Bournemouth, they accepted bids from Rovers, but this was different. Like this was, you're accepting a bid from a club that, like say, for me was just a no-go anyway. So I think as soon as, obviously there was loads of stuff that come after, but at that point, obviously again, you take a step back now and you think like you see it like from different, you think, oh yeah, I sort of half understand it, but at the time it was like, what is going on? Like what is happening? Like wow, literally my heart was just going 100 mile an hour because I was thinking, trying to sort of get around in my head as to if I said no and I was happy to come back, what would that look like? Was I going to play? I still didn't understand how that dynamic would work because that relationship had been.
Was it a light switch moment? Was it? You said you spoke to Chris quite a lot.
Yeah.
Did the relationship sour because maybe you felt like you weren't getting through to him and you kind of, as I understand it, you going, I don't want to go, and him going, we've accepted the bid. Yeah. Just go home, turn your phone off, just don't be around. Did you think that relationship was untenable?
I think, yeah, at that time, I couldn't really, I couldn't understand how we'd gone from like one place to like...
Yeah.
I remember just sort of coming off and every time I'd be taken off a sub, whether I'd missed a sitter or whatever, I'd get a hug. Like that was almost a dad hug to a son, like not. And then like from that to then, well, you might not play or you might, if you don't leave now, you might leave at the end of the season. And it was like, even to this day, I've asked the question in my head so many times how it could have gone from that to that over something. We're not talking like 20 million, we're talking like 300 grand. Like I'm sure there could have been a way of raising that amount of funds without needing to basically, like at 26, 27, that was sort of, for me, like, whoa, like, where's all that, like that last 3 years of what we'd built as a club, as a group, as a staff and a player, like that felt like literally that had just been sort of ripped up and chucked away in the sort of blink of an eye, really.
Wow. So, I mean, yeah, it's... So let's go... The deal ultimately fell through.
Yeah.
Was there must have been relief on your side, but in terms of the club, how did they feel like, oh, we've lost out on a ton of money here? Oh, you know, almost like, we've got to make the most of our top goal scorer and captain now.
I can't remember exactly when I tweeted. I don't know the exact time, but I'd obviously spoke to Calvin and Chris sort of prior to that tweet, and it was like, what we're going to do is we're going to reject the offer now. And then that's sort of that. And then we'll just see you tomorrow and we'll just crack on.
Well, I can tell you what the tweet says. I've got it right here. It says, to clear up the rumours, I have never asked to speak to Swindon, so don't know where that has come from. No truth whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's pretty emphatic.
It is. And like I say, I think it was probably something I'd written 20, 30 times over and changed bits. And I wanted to say what I wanted to say. But obviously at that point, I was still told I wasn't allowed to tweet, I wasn't allowed to message, but it got to a point where I was just like, look, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not sitting here and getting abuse and getting all these messages. I'm going to save my peace. Like I think I got to a point where actually I didn't really worry about the repercussions of it. I thought, like, you know what, like, this isn't on. Like, I'm not sitting here and getting the abuse I was getting. So yeah, I just, something I'd done previously, picked up the phone and just tweeted a message around. Thought I'd deal with the consequences but I just needed to let people know that was the case. And like I say, it wasn't long after that we spoke, and it was, we're gonna reject the offer now, and we're gonna sort of say, look, we'll see you tomorrow and we'll crack on. But I remember just sitting there just thinking, how does that go? Like, how do we just go from what we'd just been sort of through and what we'd spoke about to just coming back in? Obviously, the lads, it was funny, like they come in and said, like, oh, like, didn't expect to see you here. Like, what you, like, some of them were like, yeah, you're mad. Like, why haven't you, like, the money you could have earned? I think people struggled to understand what that sort of meant financially, that I'd said no. But for me, it's never been about money. Throughout my whole career, it's never, ever been about money. And I remember at the time, even with the Bournemouths and the Rovers, we're not talking money that you can retire. We're not talking Premier League money. So if I had left to go to Bournemouth, I would have thrown away 3 years of work and, like, say, great relationships to go and earn 100, 200 quid a week more. But then you still have to work. You've lost all your legacy of what you've done. So it was always more about that and, like, say, what the club had done for me and what I could do for them, I thought, going forward. So it might have been more money, but it wasn't something that was going to change my sort of feelings and my passion for being where I was.
Did you feel that there was a breakdown of trust? The deal has fallen through. You're almost, tail between your legs coming back to a club. Did you feel that there was a breakdown of trust between management and yourself?
Yeah, I think definitely coming back, it was literally a case of, I felt almost like nervous coming back in because I didn't know. Like I say, the last conversation we had was like, yeah, right, we've decided to reject that offer now. You come back and we go as normal. And I think it was like a sort of Thursday or Friday. I was coming back in ready to prepare for a weekend, and it was just like, just seemed strange to be coming back. In fact, like almost like I had gone and spoke to someone, or I'd done something that then, like, I've got to come back and sort of be like the person that's like, oh, it didn't quite work out. But for me, it was just a case of, I never wanted to go. I never wanted to leave the club, but I was obviously made to go and sort of, I remember them then sort of, I think they said like, oh, we didn't want him anyway, or, do you know what I mean? All these things that sort of came
It's like the playground, isn't it? It's just, oh no, well, I never said that. No.
And like say that it was just, for me then, it was, I came back and I'd never throughout my career sort of made it about like them, or I just thought, right, well, as he said, like, we'll just crack on. And I didn't know what to expect in terms of relationship, but I thought, well, I've still got my contract, I've still got like the chance to go and play games, score goals, and that was sort of my mentality, really, was to come in and sort of knuckle down.
So all of that saga obviously was through the January transfer window.
Yeah.
Looming there ahead once again is the return meet of Swindon.
Yeah.
Here we are once again. Where was your head it was March that the game was in. So where are you? It's been a couple of months now since all of this has happened. Mm-hmm. Is it water under the bridge? Are you still feeling a little bit irked at the situation? Yeah. Are you being treated differently to when, before all this saga happened in January?
Yeah, I think obviously it's settled down in terms of the paper stuff had gone away and we could focus. And I was playing, I was still being picked, but I still felt that there was a sort of an undercurrent of, well, I said like we'd be walking down a corridor and I'd be with like 4 or 5 players and they would all be welcomed like morning, so-and-so morning, and then just nothing. And I'd be like waiting for like, all right, Beano, like nothing. It'd just walk straight past.
And then from a few months you've gone captain. Like we've seen the pictures of you like lifting the trophy at Wembley to
being sort of just blanked. And like I say, it wasn't Mickey and Mel and that it was just like almost a Chris. Obviously he was picking me. I was being put on the team sheet, but there wouldn't be that same laughing, joking, like a training, like meetings before. It was a strange time, especially like say we'd be in like the change rooms or in the referees room with Chris and me and their managers, their staff, but not have that same sort of relationship was tough to sort of get your head around, because like I say, I'd loved every minute of having that relationship, to then sort of like not having it is strange. But like I don't think it was only probably 2 or 3 years, maybe even longer after I left, that people would start saying, "Oh, what was that like?" And I'd be like, "Well, we didn't really get on for like the last 2 years," which I think people find strange to sort of like say get their head around. But that relationship was sort of gone. We didn't sort of speak in the same way. We didn't have that same sort of feeling. Probably him towards me for sort of maybe not going and making him maybe look lesser of a man, like by rejecting it. So I sort of see it from that side, but I think it could have been handled probably a lot easier and a lot better from the outset. And
it feels like a breakup of a relationship. It feels like going back with your ex-girlfriend and kind of that kind of, you're right. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. That's the only way I can sort of picture it and describe it. And you sort of painted that picture yourself that but this is football, that you're spending 7 days, pretty much with your
literally
manager.
in each other's pockets, but also that thought that I knew he was here for a long time. So where does that, like my contract was running out. I didn't have that security, but obviously he did. So does that mean that he can ultimately move me on or whatever? So yeah, it was like say a strange time to sort of be in that environment in that moment, but actually I was just desperate to sort of somehow just have a meeting and just sort of rectify it and get back to how we were. But like I say, it just never seemed to sort of come about. And then obviously Swindon came and that's a different story. Yeah,
it's come in a season defined by Swindon with rumours, with the elation, coming a few months before. I guess you're fired up. I guess you're angry when this fixture comes around because of everything that's gone on. You've mentioned some particularly awful things that people had said from both sides, because you were really caught in the middle of this. The games come around. There's still the fierce rivalry, but you've got all this politics that is added on top as to what's happened. Are you going into this game just with a red mist?
Yeah, I think definitely it felt like the first Swindon game, and that sort of, it was still Swindon. We still wanted to beat them. But obviously, on the other hand, it was still fresh enough that I didn't really know where my future led. Like, obviously, I was hoping it was going to be there. But even now, like every game, I felt like I was sort of somehow on like trial again to try and stay there, because I didn't know how long that could last. Like, it was out of my control. Like, obviously, he was a manager, I was a player, and I think even like now looking back, there was games during that season, the season after, where I was being left out and I thought it was unfair. I felt I shouldn't have been left out, but it was just, for whatever reason, I wasn't being seen as the same person. And 27, 28, I felt like I'd learnt a lot of the game. I'd clever tricks or pace had gone, but actually, like there's bits that I'd learnt through that time. So I felt like I was coming into a good stage of my career.
Well, you're prime.
Not really going the other way, but I was sort of made to feel that I couldn't play 2 in a week, and I'm thinking like I'm fit, like I'm ready to go.
You're not even hit 28 yet.
No. Yeah. So for me, it was again sort of strange, and then obviously subsequently it sort of panned out. I left at the club at sort of 29, but still for me that was like, I was fit and there was no issue. Like I wasn't failing medicals or anything like that. It was just, I don't know, just made to feel that maybe I wasn't the same player I was when I joined the club.
So come to the day of the Swindon game, fired up. We know you're fired up. Everything that's been going on.
And as if that wasn't enough, there's off the pitch too. It's Swindon are top of the league, trying to get back up. They've won 10 games on the trot. 11 will be record-breaking for them. So, of course, that brings the Oxford game. You haven't done the double over them since 1973. So there's a lot riding on this.
Yeah.
And you get a red card.
After 10 minutes, yeah.
Sorry. So I'm not... Was that inevitable?
I think going into the game, there was always, like, I think we had spoke about it. Like we were saying, look, we knew like Richie, and we knew certain players that could potentially fly into a tackle, or we were told like if we could step on toes at corners, like cause a reaction. Do you know what I mean? Just be clever, get them in a position where they might lash out or do something silly and get sent off. So obviously for us, that was what we were. We believed we were good enough to win the game anyway, but we thought, look, if we being at home, we thought we might have a bit of added impetus, more fans. Like there might be a way of getting them sort of riled up. So like I say, that was our plan, sort of unsettle them. Obviously their plan was probably the same. And then 10 minutes in, jump to win a ball, sent off. I remember sort of just feeling like their players were being like overly nice, like sort of like patting me on the head and trying to sort of usher me off the pitch. And just like when I look back now, how I sort of managed to get off the pitch without sort of lumping one of them, because it literally is like that sort of like pat on the back. Come on, mate, off you go. But yeah, just remember just feeling like overwhelmingly I let people down. Obviously the fans, like, I could just hear that intake of breath that like, oh my God, like down to 10 men after 10 minutes. Just walking off the pitch and obviously seeing them all sort of clapping me, but knew sort of deep down that actually being sent off was going to make it tough for the next 80 minutes with 10 men was going to be a big ask. But yeah, went into the change room, sat down, and I hadn't been in there more than probably 5-10 minutes. I think I was kicking things around and smashing bottles around, and then heard a cheer, and I instantly thought they'd had someone sent off. I thought, it's like they're one of those.
sort of those games.
It's 10-all, but no, like I say, I think Ace had scored, and I managed to quickly sort of jump in the shower, get changed in my tracksuit, get upstairs to the press, because you weren't allowed back anywhere near the pitch. You weren't allowed in the in the stand. You literally had to be. I think back then they wanted you to stay in the change room, but like I say, I managed to make my way up to the press box and obviously stood in there, saw the remainder of the game. Obviously, Ollie Johnson, I think, scoring a second, and just for me, just relief that like we had managed to, the lads produce a performance that, like, say, 10 wins on the bounce, like a team that were fighting for promotion down to 10 men after 10 minutes is unbelievable to produce that.
It's amazing that, given everything we've said about the treatment you had after the Swindon transfer speculation and how you were feeling, that your first thought after all that is not, woe is me. It's about the team, and I've got to go and watch what's going on. The team are back in this because you thought it's a red card or whatever. Your thoughts are still with those 10 guys you share the pitch with rather than yourself.
Well, I think any player, once you're in that environment, you're sort of with these, like I say, you spend these more time with these guys than you do your family. You miss it. Like, it is like a sort of brotherhood of, like, seeing them like out there. I was just thinking that I've been in that situation where, say, Jake's been sent off or Kreutz has been sent off, and you're sort of up against it, and it's, I think as a player, sometimes it's quite like you like that responsibility. You're like, right, let's get together, like tuck in, like let's make it difficult. And
well, people say it's
a siege
mentality.
The commentator thing is like, it's harder to play against 10 men.
It always is, but actually it's quite, sounds like crazy, but it's quite enjoyable to be like in and sort of in the trenches and fighting it. And like I say, I was just watching it thinking, like, I hope they're getting that feeling, and they're enjoying this non-stop sort of bombardment. But actually, like I say, to get over the line and be in the change room at the end, it was a strange one because I didn't get involved in the celebrations, didn't like feel.
Well, you're not even wearing your kit at this point.
Yeah, I didn't feel part of it. It's like strange. Like literally, I'd played 10 minutes. We were 0-0 at that point. I hadn't. It's not like I'd scored and been sent off in the 90th minute. It was like literally, I'd been there 10 minutes. I'd sort of caused these guys. So I remember just sort of sitting out the way. I wanted them to enjoy it. Like they've done this, they've achieved this, nothing to do with me. And I like come out and I saw fans that wanted to hug me and like And I was just like, I just didn't want to be part of it. I just wanted to literally just get home, cut myself off from, like, I hadn't achieved that with them. That was them that achieved it. And obviously in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, this is going to be 3 games. Like, you can appeal stuff, but I think everyone knows that you complete sort of stab in the dark. You're never going to win against certain appeals. So it was one of those, I thought, right, for the next 3 games now, I'm going to miss out and I'm not going to be part of that and sort of enjoy the atmosphere that brings. The training the next week's going to be on a high because of what's happened. And it's, for me, it's like, yeah, you've got to sort of get by now and know you're going to be running after training because you're not going to be playing for the next few weeks. Is not enjoyable.
But that wasn't the only thing. It's, I mean, you sort of say, and kind of understandably so, that you didn't feel part of the celebration. You felt like you let the team down. And you harbour that, and you, like you say, you didn't celebrate and what have you with them. But also, a bizarre situation happened afterwards.
Yeah, a letter just got sort of popped on my seat at the training ground, and just sort of strange to be getting in at, say, after a game and have sort of notes. So yeah, just opened it, and there was a letter from the club. Didn't say like addressed from anybody as such. It just said from, like, obviously Oxford United, and stated that I'm going to be sort of fined 2 weeks' wages because of my sending off against Swindon. There was no option to sort of appeal it or anything like that. And I remember sort of taking it to Chris, and again, our relationship wasn't fantastic in terms of sort of off the pitch. Like when I was playing, he could tell me instructions and he'd shout on, but away from that, it was not really existent. And then I remember sort of taking that to him, saying, like, is this a joke? Like 2 weeks' wages for getting sent off? Like. Yeah. I'd been sent off against Crewe, and I'd sort of been booked in loads of games where sometimes I think they made a thing one season where you'd have to pay the admin fee. So if you got booked, and then you might be fined sort of 25 quid if it's dissent and things like that. But to be fined 2 weeks' wages, I said, like, that's like reserved for like the most extreme things that can happen for a player. Like
you actually said, and I didn't know this about football at all, but that's actually the most severe punishment maximum, that a club can enforce on a player within their contract is fining them 2 weeks' wages for whatever they have done or done. Yeah. And
I think Tevez, when he went sort of AWOL and didn't return for training and things, that he was fined 2 weeks. Wages out of a month's money. That's the maximum. And
look at all these things. Zuma, Ronaldo. About to name a few names. Yeah. It's like, and the same punishment.
For sending off. Which again, I was adamant that I didn't mean that. I didn't cause anything. That, like, say, he jumped back up, and I was at Eastleigh, and we played, I think, Bromley, and he was playing that game, and I sort of said, like, I recognised him straight away, and said, like, you're the guy that got me sent off, and they were again saying that's something they had worked on, and they saw that as a probably a key point in the game if they could get me out of the way, that they were hoping that would mean that they'd go on and win, which ultimately backfired. But I think that was the plan, was to get me sent off. So to hear that then, sort of years down the line, almost made me more angry that I had fallen for that trap. Like, that, obviously teams will always try and get players sent off, but especially for them to do it and, like, say, it work. And but like I say, the only sort of solace really you take in it is that it didn't work. We went on and beat them and ruin their party and their celebrations.
At the time, did the fine, was that really, really important to you? Was that the, dare I say, the beginning of an end of a relationship that was a bit of turmoil already?
Yeah.
Let's forget, as we've gone through, you've still been the top scorer for the last 3 seasons. This is, in the second season back in league football, the fans are still cheering your name, still club legend. And this is all happening on outside and around you. Yeah. Are you feeling like you're not getting enough back from the club that you're putting in?
Yeah, I think it definitely sort of heaped on that sort of feeling of a little bit of sort of, I'm being picked on here. Like, I think 2 weeks' wages, like I say, I'd been there 4 years by this point, and I can't remember anybody getting a 2 week wage fine. So yeah, I think for me it was definitely something that I felt was unfair, and even when I sort of brought it up with Chris, and it was made to feel like, look, we need to send a message to the club, like, and the fans to know that you've admitted, like, that you've let everyone down. And I was like, yeah, but I didn't feel like I did anything. So I didn't.
The red card itself, I've watched it. The reaction you give to the ref is a lot more scary.
Yeah, exactly. Because I just couldn't believe that I'd been sent off. But from his point of view, he was saying that we need to send a message to say that you've let him down. And I was like, yeah, but that doesn't equate to a 2 weeks wait.
No.
And then, like I say, the money is like it was the fact that I'd have rather it been given to charity or something, but the fact that it was being taken just for the club to have 2 weeks wages just to sort of show something, which didn't really make any sense. But like I say, it sort of probably soured an already sort of turbulent time between me and Chris.
It just seems unbelievable, given the year before you say about the contract not being right, not getting paid the right amount, and you didn't cause a fuss about it.
No.
It's two ends of the spectrum, two completely extreme opposite ends of the spectrum.
But I think as well, like, I spoke to Laura like quite a bit recently because we've been doing the podcast and it's brought up lots of sort of, because she lives through things that like probably I don't maybe question at the time, but like if we lost on a Saturday, I wouldn't speak to her. Literally, we'd drive home in the car, I'd be looking out the window, she'd be looking, and I'd get home, I wouldn't eat, she'd have takeaway or whatever. Like I wouldn't. It was almost like starving yourself because of the disappointment of not winning. So we spoke about sort of different things and like say you realise things that obviously they've gone through, but I think at the time it was just, it felt like it was just a step of that relationship sort of coming apart. And I say at the time you didn't sort of think too much, but actually it ultimately sort of didn't really get any better from that, that things could have been sort of handled differently or not reacted in the way they did, but actually then caused this rift to be sort of greater, really.
No, it's been yet another. What's been interesting is it's a yet another season where so much has gone on and so much different things has gone on with one particular player centered around you. And I definitely think this should be called, the Swindon episode or something, because they rear their ugly heads numerous times. But you even, to sort of wrap up, even now to this day, retired footballer. You still have that kind of that feeling towards Swindon and similarly towards you as well because of this crazy year.
Yeah, I think, like I say, that game, obviously the sending off with the whole transfer for Saga and then obviously that game especially. But I remember after that game, I had to drive back to Bassett and I remember sort of sloping down in my seat, just pulling into the estate because there was, my next door neighbour was a Swindon fan, but it wasn't to the levels of abuse, and they were just like, hope you lose today every time they saw me sort of getting in the car going to
you can take that one, yeah.
You can tell, I'm like, yeah, okay, hope you lose. And it was fun, but actually to pull back in, I was thinking like, obviously after the Swindon, the home game, that was sort of bad enough, but obviously the away game with what had gone on, and I was thinking, well, this could be sort of a bit of a sticky sort of time. But yeah, I think even to that, it sort of raised that level of like, I won't sort of go into Swindon. I won't, like, we have birthday parties and they want it like in, like, obviously my brothers and my grandma and family live sort of Wiltshire that way, but no, I won't sort of go in. I won't go shopping in Swindon. I'll try and.
You said to me you'd go as far as Bristol.
Yeah,
to go past it.
When we were living in Wootton Bassett, yeah, we'd literally drive sort of through Swindon out the other end and all the way to Bristol to go out for shopping or go for tea, just because we just didn't want to go into Swindon, and not for a fear of what had that it given me that much sort of aggro and that much sort of pain over that year. It's literally tarnished it where I won't sort of tend to go in there, or I won't sort of drive through it. I'll try and sort of drive around to get anywhere. It's strange, but yeah, the eldest was actually born in Swindon Hospital, which is even stranger because we were sort of forced to be there for that, and then yeah, the second one was born in Salisbury, so it's nicer that we didn't have to have sort of two that were born there. But
should have been born in Swindon, but keep driving.
I said to Laura, hold on, like we're going to Salisbury. But no, it's it's strange how it does. But I think ultimately that sort of game and that feeling that, like I say, that they were desperate to sort of do that and get me that sort of sending off or get me in trouble was probably the sort of final thing that really put me off them completely.
No, well, that's quite a nice sort of place to end, I think, this podcast. It's been absolutely fascinating. The next one we're going to be doing in Swindon. So
I'll be doing it through Zoom.
we're doing it through Zoom.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Look, a big thank you, James Constable, for sort of letting us know so many brilliant things that we absolutely didn't know about for this episode of the podcast. Also, a massive thank you to the Part and Parcel here in Witney, where we are right now, the safety of Witney. Big thanks for letting us use the space in here. A big thank you to Statman Ted for pulling us up and keeping us on the straight and narrow. My name's been Rich Smith from Get Radio, and a big thank you to them for powering this podcast through. We will return with another episode of the James Constable Podcast, and we're going to dive into a little bit more about captaincy and what that kind of means. So make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Tell your friends, and we'll be back with another episode of the James Constable Podcast on Tuesday. You've been listening to the James Constable Podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. We're going to have a new episode dropping every Tuesday. This has been powered by Get Radio, Oxfordshire's local radio station. Head to getradio.co.uk for more updates and details.